Welcome to tonight's webinar. We're really excited for this one. It's on the topic of food shopping when you have PKD or you or someone you love have PKD. Want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional ceded and unceded territories of the Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island in the land that the colonizing peoples now call Canada. We're deeply grateful to live, work, and learn on these lands, which have been cared for by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. We honor the lasting connection between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. We recognize the importance of learning from, respecting, and amplifying the histories, cultures, and contributions of all Indigenous peoples. And we humbly acknowledge the need to work towards restoring meaningful, honorable relationships with them, which includes advocating for the co-creation of culturally safe healthcare systems, the closing of any health gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, and the embedding of Indigenous wellness into all aspects of kidney healthcare. My name is Michelle Lynn Goodfellow, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for the PKD Foundation of Canada, which is the only national organization solely dedicated to fighting PKD through research, awareness, and advocacy, and education and support. So moving on to tonight's event, we hear a lot, and we just recently had a survey that some of you may participated in on nutrition. But we hear again and again from people who are living with PKD that food decisions can feel confusing and overwhelming. And so we know there's a lot of information online, and sometimes the advice seems to contradict itself. People often tell us that the hardest part isn't knowing that nutrition matters, it's knowing what actually applies to them personally and how to turn that advice into everyday meals and grocery choices. So that's exactly why we're so grateful to have registered dietitian Emily Campbell with us this evening. Emily has worked with many people living with PKD, and she has a wonderful way of translating nutrition science into practical real-life guidance. Tonight, she'll walk us through the grocery store aisle by aisle, and share tips to make food choices feel clearer, simpler, and more manageable. And after the presentation, we'll leave time for a live question and answer period. A little bit more about Emily. She's a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator with a master's degree in foods and nutrition. Emily specializes in helping those with kidney disease overcome the confusing world of nutrition to promote health. And you can find Emily online at kidneynutrition.ca. So welcome, Emily, and I will now turn over the presentation to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. It is such a beautiful day outside here in Toronto. I appreciate you staying in to cook with me tonight and to talk a little bit about grocery shopping and foods with polycystic kidney disease. Tonight is a really great topic for us to understand how kind of all foods can still fit when we have PKD. Because foods are not bad or good when we have PKD, but they can feel like they are. And I think, understanding how we can use the grocery store as a tool for us to plan meals and find delicious and really nutritious foods is what we're going to be covering tonight. So tonight we'll be talking about general recommendations for PKD when we look at these foods. It is really important that you speak with your physician or your own dietitian to understand if there's any personalized things. And when I say personalized, what I mean is based on your blood work, because our blood work is the best way of understanding what our body needs. And while we all eat lots of food, our blood work helps us, our food preferences help us really tailor things and make it personalized to us. So I think, let's just jump into the grocery store. I wish I could keep you in my back pocket, take you to the grocery store, but sometimes they don't like you recording there. So we have, all of our foods, we have all of our aisles here, and I'm going to walk you through the grocery store. We're going to look at what it is, where it is, and what we can be looking for to add into our cart with PKD tonight. So the chat is open. I see that there are some questions coming in there. And we will manage those as well. So feel free to put those through and I will try to answer them as we're going. If not, we'll have lots of time. We'll talk about the grocery store. We're going to make a food demo of some delicious energy balls from one of our new resources for you. So I have my copies of Love Your Kidneys. If you haven't picked up your copies, they are available on the PKD website. Tonight, we're going to be making an energy ball from our newest edition, which is called Love Your Kidneys, Planning PKD-Friendly Meals. And we are going to make this delicious, great snack of no-bake energy bites tonight. But we'll talk a little bit about the grocery store because we need to get our supplies before we can make it. So, when we go to the grocery store, they're all pretty much set up the same, right? They all have the same format. There's the produce section, there's the meat and the dairy usually at the backside, and then there's the frozen section, and then there's sometimes that really daunting section in the middle that we think we need to avoid when we have PKD. But we'll talk about why that aisle can actually be really helpful for us. When we're, cooking and shopping and making our grocery list, that actually helps us to, one, make sure that our meals are balanced so that we have all of the right foods available for us. I can't tell you how many times I've heard I open the fridge and I stare in there and I think, what am I going to do with these things? And so by having a little bit of a plan before we go to the store, we can make sure that what we have in our fridge or in our freezer or in our cupboard is going to help support us throughout the week. And especially when things get busy, because let's be honest, we get stuck in traffic, someone books that last minute meeting, you get home and you're like, I have 30 minutes before I need to go pick up the kids or take my parents to something. And so there's all these extra competing priorities. And so we really want to be shopping at the grocery store strategically. The other piece of it is, we probably have other mouths that we're feeding, not just ourselves. And so we want to make sure that the kids are going to eat it, or our partners are going to eat it, or our parents are going to eat it as well. And the PKD diet at the end of the day is just a very healthful diet, and everyone can eat it because everyone can personalize their meals to themselves. If someone needs more salt than you, they can do that. If someone needs less fiber than you, they can do that. And so that's the nice part about cooking for families, is that we can all eat these really nutritious and delicious meals. And lastly, before we go to the grocery store, it helps us make sure we're going to get enough of the right nutrients. So, we can start with meal planning and thinking about even just a couple of meals per week that we might want to focus on. It's okay to eat the same breakfast every day. If you have a standard, something that you like in the morning, it's nice and balanced, and that's easy Monday to Friday, then definitely that's no problem. It's usually lunch and dinner that we have more of a struggle with because those tend to be either outside of the house if we're at work or crunch time when we get home. So when we go to the grocery store, sometimes that's where we really want to be focusing on meal planning. And whenever we think about our meals, we always want to make sure that we think about kind of our plate, right? So anytime we're making our grocery list, we want to make sure that there's going to be lots of vegetables in that fridge, or fruit. Maybe you're putting them on the counter. Then we want to make sure that there's some whole grains and that there's some lean sources of protein. And when we think about making our grocery list, instead of just putting vegetables on it, we can find different ways that we can use each vegetable. So for example, maybe we go to the grocery store today and we stop in that produce aisle and we pick up broccoli. This is silicone broccoli, half a cup portion of it. But if you were to grab broccoli at the grocery store, what you could do is maybe you roast it one day. Maybe you put it in a stir fry another day. Thinking of ways that you can use multiple vegetables or a vegetable in multiple times can really help lower the cost of our food budget and also prevent food waste. So when we make our little list to go to the grocery store, that's one of the kind of the strategies that we want to put on in. But the first thing when we get into the grocery store is typically that produce aisle. And some of the common things from a PKD perspective that I hear are, what about potassium? Why do I need vegetables? And how can I add vegetables if I don't like them? So the biggest concern we hear from a potassium perspective is that, do I need to avoid certain foods like mango, for example, or banana. And so with PKD, these often are heard, oh, even avocado here I picked up at the grocery store this week. So often we hear that these fruits and vegetables are high in potassium and we need to be avoiding them with PKD. But early in PKD, potassium is actually really helpful at improving our blood pressure. So we want to incorporate potassium foods into our diet. Vegetables and fruits also have fiber in them. Fiber keeps us full. It helps us go to the bathroom. The only time we would really want to be avoiding potassium from vegetables and fruits is really not ever. So even if you have a high potassium, it's just about portion size. So for example, an orange is going to have a lot more potassium in it than a clementine, right? A little bit of banana is going to have a lot less potassium than a whole banana. And so when we think about potassium, the first thing we need to know is what is our blood potassium? Because that's going to help us understand whether or not we even need to be concerned about foods with potassium in them. We're going to talk a bit about potassium on the food labels, and that's something that everyone should be concerned about. But generally speaking, we don't really want to be avoiding any of those fruits or vegetables. Sometimes we might want smaller portions, but that really depends on our blood work. When we're at the grocery store, I have a lot of fresh vegetables and fruits here. So, things like lettuce, romaine lettuce, iceberg lettuce, arugula, spinach, all of these leafy greens can certainly be included. I have a bit of cucumber here today. I don't have a lot of different colors of my vegetables today. I need to go to the grocery store again. But some of these actually come in fresh or frozen options. And both of those are just as nutritious. In fact, in Canada, sometimes depending on the time of year, the frozen vegetables can be even more nutritious than the fresh ones. Because if you think about how far some of them need to travel, they pick them at their peak ripeness. And by the time they get here, they've lost some of their nutritional value, or sorry, they don't pick them at their prime ripeness. They pick them when they're early and they ripe them on the way here. And so by the time they get here, they might not have all of that nutrients. Whereas sometimes with frozen vegetables, they can be grown in Canada. We've already picked them. We flash froze them. So fresh or frozen, doesn't matter. They're equally as nutritious. Similarly, you can often get canned things. So canned sometimes gets a bad rap because of salt or sugar. There are lots of products on the market that say no added salt for some of our canned vegetables. And the benefit to having canned vegetables or frozen vegetables is that if we are working on increasing our vegetables to that half plate, the frozen and the canned ones are going to last a bit longer. They can sometimes also be a little bit more cost effective too. So those are great ways of thinking about how we can incorporate them. And then with the fruit, we just want to look for ones that say unsweetened, right? So sometimes those fruit cups can come in sugar water. We want to look for the ones that are not. And those are nice ways that we can incorporate some shelf-stable foods in our cupboards too, so that if you're in a panic one day and you're going to eat leftover protein and you have some rice or something in the fridge and you're really looking for a vegetable, we always have those in the cupboard. We're actually going to use this applesauce in our recipe shortly. Fiber is what we get mostly from vegetables and fruits. From this rainbow of foods that we're going to incorporate, there's the red, the green, the yellow, the orange, the purple, the white. They each have different vitamins and minerals in them, which is important. But the main thing is fiber. And we want fiber with PKD because we want to be consuming about 21 grams of fiber per day. This apple, it only has about 2 grams of fiber. So when you think about how many fruits and vegetables we need to eat per day, we need to eat quite a bit of them in order to get close to that 21 grams of fiber. This half a cup of broccoli, also 2 grams of fiber. So if this, is at what we have at lunch, for example, maybe we have some protein and some bread as well. Use your imagination with this meal. That's only going to be about 4 grams right from there. We still got a little ways to go, so we can use those whole grains to help us add a bit more fiber, which we'll talk about in just a second. But we need to eat quite a bit of vegetables and fruits per day. A serving of vegetables and fruits is typically 1 piece of fruit, right? Or it would be 1 cup of leafy greens, So if we had our lettuce or our spinach or arugula, it's about 1 cup, which is actually about the size of our fist. Okay. If it's something that's cut up, like our broccoli or our cauliflower or our cucumber, 1/2 cup. So half of these. So if we think about how much we're having right now, we can start to aim for about 5 servings of vegetables per day. Can help us to manage our blood pressure. And we know that many individuals with PKD have high blood pressure. It's often the first sign of PKD. So by adding in those foods with potassium, magnesium, they all help to lower the blood pressure. So that's why we want a lot of vegetables and fruit in our diet. And then the fiber also helps to keep us full, helps our bowels moving, helps to create good prebiotics in our gut. And so that is why we want the fiber piece. As we kind of go through the grocery store, we tend to move into that center aisle next. And that's often when we'll see some of these canned foods or packaged foods. And often we get most concerned about sodium from there. I think with PKD, we often hear about the carbohydrates and whether or not we want to be consuming those in our diet. The keto diet has been quite popular. So we'll talk a little bit about, should we be following a keto diet? But really, what the center aisle offers us is labels. And we can use those to make good food choices. So one of the things we'll be using in our recipe tonight is whole grain oats. So you can always find things that are whole grain because they will have the whole grain label on them in the ingredient list. And so when we look in the ingredient list, we want to look for whole grains. They will also have symbols on them. So you can see on this one, it's nice and big. The whole grain symbol looks just like this. Means that there's whole grains in that product. And from a carbohydrate perspective, oatmeal, whole grains, crackers, any of these have more fiber in them. They're going to keep us full for longer. They're often higher in vitamins, sometimes iron, B vitamins as well. So when we think about carbohydrates, we want to be focusing on those whole grain, complex carbohydrates. Oatmeal in our recipe, it provides us with fiber from beta glucan, which can help to lower our cholesterol levels, can also help with our bowels. And there's actually different types of oatmeal. So tonight I have rolled oats. There's also steel cut, there's instant, and we'll talk about this in a bread or a grains perspective as well. But just like there is, white whole wheat and multi-grain, there's different levels of oats. And so there's steel cut, which is going to be the least processed. Then there's the large flake and the rolled oats, and then there's the instant oats. And so that kind of hierarchy of how we might want to choose different foods can provide us with different benefits. So steel cut, rolled, large flake, they have the least amount of processing, and they're going to keep us full for the longest. Just like with breads, whole grains, they have the least amount of processing. Whereas multigrains, we've kind of picked pieces from different types of grains, and we might have the bran from this one and the germ from this one and the endosperm from this one, but we don't have the whole component yet. Whereas white or refined carbohydrates, like white breads, white pastas, they tend to have the least amount of nutrients in them. So if we are incorporating carbohydrates, we want those ones that say whole grains because they have quite a lot of fiber in them. Other examples of whole grains are crackers. So we can always look for the whole grain in the ingredient list. And then we can also get pasta as whole grain as well. There's rice, brown rice, wild rice. All of these are other really great options as well too. And we focus on this fiber because it's great from a heart health perspective. It lowers that bad cholesterol. It also can help to control our blood sugars if we're living with diabetes. Because they're lower in the glycemic index, meaning they don't increase our blood sugars as quickly as refined carbohydrates. They can help with satiety, which helps with weight management as well. And they're really nutrient dense. So whole grains have things like antioxidants and polyphenols in it. which is often why sometimes people look for things like herbal teas. And depending on your medications, some can interact with some teas can interact with medications. I know there was a question about herbal teas and post transplant. So it really depends on what transplant medications that you're on. The general interactions tend to be around Seville oranges. It's really important that you talk with your transplant team to see if there's any others that they like to recommend avoiding. But if you're on medications like Jynarque or tolvaptan, from a PKD perspective, of course, avoiding grapefruit. And then if your kidney function is less than 90, we want to be avoiding star fruit. In terms of keto versus not keto, there's so much mixed evidence out there right now. Here in Canada, we tend to be following more of a portion size, which we can do by following our plate, right? And trying to keep that portion size of carbohydrates to about the quarter of it. And then choosing those whole grains because we know they have a lot of other health benefits in them. Um, the concern of the keto diet, aside from kind of a sustainability piece with it, is making sure that we're not displacing other nutrients. So we already know that planning meals and grocery shopping and eating a nutritious diet can be challenging. When we add another layer to it, it can make the sustainability piece more difficult. So right now here in Canada, we aren't tend to recommend a keto diet for PKD. But if you are interested in trying it, it's really important that you work with your healthcare team to make sure you're not over consuming on things like saturated fats, which can put us at risk of cardiovascular disease, and under consuming on fiber because those whole grains tend to be quite a big fiber source. So for example, this pasta in a quarter of the packet has 6 grams of fiber in it. Pieces of bread that can have about 2 to 4 grams of fiber in it. So we know that our vegetables and fruits have a certain amount of fiber per day, but we want to make sure that we are adding up from the whole grains as well. Something else that we find in that center aisle is some of our plant-based proteins. And plant-based proteins with PKD are really, really helpful at making it easier for the kidneys to filter. And what we do know based on the KDIGO guidelines from 2025 is that we want to be incorporating more of these plant-based proteins. So we typically recommend to have 2 out of your 3 meals per day of plant-based. There's no concrete recommendation right now with PKD that we need to be 100% plant-based, but the more plant-based we can be, the better. And some examples of plant-based proteins are peanut butter, which we're going to be using in our recipe tonight. So I picked up smooth peanut butter. That's not a peanut butter that we typically eat in our house, which is why we just have a little jar of it. We are much more of a crunchy family here, and everyone has their preferences. And you can probably see that this is a natural peanut butter. That's also not necessary for you to buy. And I have a couple of examples here of some food labels, which I'll bring closer to the screen in just a second. But this is the normal Kraft compared to the all natural Kraft. And this is a question I often get when we say, to add things like nuts and seeds and nut butters into our diet. Because 1 tablespoon of nut butter, it has 3 grams of protein in it. And 1 gram of fiber. Not too much fiber, but still good. But great sources of unsaturated fats. And when you compare the normal Kraft to the all natural Kraft, it's basically the same. So it's really just choose your own. Some people like mixing the oil in, they like it a little bit more chunkier, and that's totally fine. But really, if you compare this label, I'll just show you up here for a few seconds. Pretty much everything is identical. And then if we look at the natural one here, do it this way. Really, the difference is like 1% in the fat, and the sodium is the exact same. So we don't really need to be too concerned. You can also get the no added salt peanut butter if you do need to save on a couple of milligrams of salt. But generally, choose your own adventure, whichever one you like. There are a lot of other really great things in the center aisle from a plant-based protein perspective as well. Things like beans. So again, this is about half a cup portion of those beans. They're great from a fiber perspective. In our recipe, we have some nuts. So we have walnuts, which are a great source of omega-3, magnesium, another plant-based protein. We also have flax seeds. So in this recipe, we are using flax seeds as opposed to ground flax because we want them actually from a fiber perspective. When we use ground flax, they're more of an omega-3 addition to our benefit. Whole flax is great for adding things like crunch in cereals, energy balls, bread, whereas the ground one is better for adding omega-3. And if you are using the ground one, make sure you keep it in the fridge. We also have some hemp hearts. Hemp hearts are a really great source of plant-based protein and also omega-3 because we're getting the omega-3 from the hemp hearts. That's why we're using the whole flax tonight. But we were talking about beans. So beans and all of these great plant-based proteins we can find in the center aisle. What I love about canned beans is their convenience. So you, again, can get ones that are no added salt on them. There's lots of different brands out there. The other one that you can get are dried beans. So if you have a lot of time on your hand and you can soak your beans ahead of time and prepare them, then dried beans are fine. They tend to be a lot more cost effective than canned beans, but canned beans are also fine to have. Canned beans actually have less potassium and phosphorus in them than dried because they are, it's removed in the packaging of the canned beans. Also, if you soak your beans and boil the dried ones for longer, it does reduce the potassium and phosphorus as well. But the phosphorus and potassium from beans are natural potassium and phosphorus sources. These ones we only absorb about 40 to 60%, whereas added phosphorus and potassium, which again we'll chat about in just a second when we look at some of the labels that will have it on it, we absorb 100% of that potassium and phosphorus. So we don't want to be staying away from these really nutritious foods because we don't absorb all of the potassium in them. For example, a banana has 422 milligrams of potassium in a medium-sized banana. We only absorb about 40% of that. If we were to have something like this low sodium, where is it? Sorry, this almond beverage has potassium added into it. It has 175 milligrams of potassium in it. We're going to absorb 100% of this potassium. That's almost like having that banana, right? A couple milligrams different. And so when we think about the nutrition quality, the banana is going to have a bit more fiber in it. It's going to keep us full. It's going to give us other vitamins as well. And how I know that is because on the food label, we can see right here that it says potassium citrate was added. And so when we read the food ingredient list, we want to be on the lookout for potassium and phosphorus additives. And that's where we find them in those packaged foods. In terms of, brand preferences for things, I think that is a lot of personal choice. Whether you choose, Blue Menu or Unico, I have a couple of Unico as well options here. There's also no added salt products with them. That's definitely personal preference. So I think our budget and what we get at our grocery store are also things that come into mind. But from a sodium perspective, looking for things that say no added salt is what we want on the food label. When they say no added salt, it means that there is not going to be any put into the manufacturing. Another example is soups. So this cream of mushroom soup has no added salt. We can look at the ingredient list. In half a cup, there is going to be 1% sodium. Some soups also come in a reduced salt. So it might say 25% less sodium. That means, just like this Swiss chalet sauce, you can see how it has 25% less sodium. These types of products, they actually mean that they've reduced it 25% compared to the original product. Similarly, soups, broths, those are types that really have a lot of examples um, that have the reduction in sodium. It doesn't mean that it's not still high in sodium. So if we look at this one, for 1/16 of the pouch, you can still see that it has 6% sodium in it. So we can, manage our portion size of how much we're having of it, and that can help to keep it within a lower amount of sodium. Um, from a sodium perspective, we want to be targeting about 2,000 milligrams of salt per day. And what that is it's a little bit less than a teaspoon of salt. A teaspoon is about the tip of our finger here. And that's salt from everything. So that's salt from foods that have it naturally, like things like cheese and bread. It's also salt from seasonings that we add in. So when we're looking in the center aisle, we want to be looking for things like dried herbs or spices to add flavoring, without the salt. We want to be looking for products that say no added salt. And it doesn't matter if it's fresh or dried herbs, but we want to be staying away from things that are half salt. So things like New Salt is a brand. They have products out there where they've added potassium chloride, which then becomes that potassium additive. So we want to stay away from those things. Okay. I just saw a few things come in there, but not being able to read the food labels. So I'll try to get closer to the camera. So sorry about that. We were in the center aisles and we were talking a little bit about plant-based proteins. One of the other kind of ways that we can get plant-based proteins in are things like tofu. And I would say tofu is definitely one of the ways that we can transition into the dairy and the fridge section as well. So tofu is made of soy, which also has some great cholesterol lowering effects for us. But one of the nice things about tofu is that it can actually be a calcium source as well in our diet. And so when we look at tofu, we can always look in the ingredient list to see if there is calcium, and then also what percentage in milligrams of calcium is in it per serving. And that's how we can see if it has a calcium source. Tofu is a very acquired taste, though. While it does take up a lot of the flavors that we're cooking with it, things like ginger and garlic, coconut aminos. I've had a lot of patients tell me recently that they'll put it in curries or soups as well, as opposed to just things like stir-fry dishes. But if you don't like tofu, other plant-based proteins are things like our nuts, our seeds, our beans, things like quinoa. That's actually a full plant-based protein as well and has all of the amino acids in it. And when we're thinking of incorporating plant-based, when we're thinking about different beans and plant-based proteins to add into the diet, there aren't any that are better than others. So when we are adding in, whether it be lentils or chickpeas, any of them are great. The more plant-based proteins we can get, the better. Okay. So the potassium that you are getting from foods, whether it be potatoes or nuts or seeds, those are all absorbed at that 40 to 60%. So it doesn't matter which ones you choose. Certainly, if you are concerned from a nuts and seeds perspective, things like walnuts, which we're going to use in our recipe in just a minute, pecans, pistachios, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds tend to be the lowest ones as well, and all still have that great omega-3 in it too. All right, so want to make sure that we make our energy balls today, but we need to travel down to the dairy section. And dairy products tend to be that biggest source of calcium in our diet. So there are certainly things that a question I often get is about yogurt. So Greek yogurt or plain yogurt or probiotic yogurt. And the answer is it really depends on what amount of protein you're having at the rest of that meal. Whenever we look at the food label, we always want to make sure that we're looking at the serving size first, which is always at the top there. And then we can use the percent daily value on the side to see how much sodium is in it. So we talked about that 2000 milligrams. That means that whenever we have an individual item, we want it to be about 5% or less. When we think about our protein needs with PKD, dairy products can be included, but they do have quite a lot of protein in them. So for example, Greek yogurt, in that 3/4 of a cup of, half a cup of yogurt, that's going to have 10 grams of protein. That's the same as almost eating 2 eggs. So some individuals will choose non-dairy products, so things like soy milk, almond milk, oat milk, coconut yogurt, because it can help them keep their protein more in line. But with PKD, we're actually not following a low protein diet. That's very much for chronic kidney disease. With PKD, we're really wanting to be aiming for that 0.8 to 1 grams per kilogram. We don't want to go more than 1.3 grams per kilogram, because when we go more than that, that actually can lead to cyst growth. But the goal is really to be focusing more on those plant-based sources. So trying to incorporate 2 out of the 3 meals per day of with plant-based meals. So for example, maybe in the morning you have something like some Greek yogurt, maybe you have some nuts and seeds, and you have some fruit on it. That's a way of getting a nice balanced breakfast. Or maybe you do some scrambled tofu with some vegetables and a slice of whole grain bread. Another way of getting in a nice plant-based meal in the morning. When we think about protein amounts throughout the day, we can use our hands as well as kind of a good starting point. So, for example, if it was something like chicken or an animal protein, we do want to keep it to about the size of our palm or a deck of cards. That's really the only thing that we want to be limiting from a protein perspective. The nuts and seeds and beans and legumes, nut butters, they have less protein proportion. So we don't have recommendations of, only have this amount, right? There's not really a way that we're going to overeat on our plant-based proteins. So it's really just the animals' proteins that we want a portion size. So that might be the size of our palm in chicken, or it could be 2 eggs. Another nice thing in the dairy section, because we're still there, is that we often can find lower fat options. So for example, some cheese will have this blue label on it. And that's a nice indicator that it is a lower fat option. And so thinking about our cardiovascular health, one of the things with dairy products is they can be quite high in saturated fats. So we want to make sure that we're choosing lower fat dairy products. So things like milk and yogurt, that's 2% or less. If it's cheese, we want to look for one that's 20% or less. And that's ways of incorporating that lower fat option. So on the cheese label, you will always see this percentage MF, and that stands for the milk fat. So this cheese is 31% milk fat. We would also want to take a look at the sodium. So in a 3 centimeter cube, which is about the same size as this, it has 11% sodium. So we might want to have less than this portion if we were choosing this one. And that's another way of how we can make foods fit into our diet. So want to make sure that we're also making our energy balls today, but we also need to talk about when we're on the go, because that can be a big thing, dealing with our cravings as well. And also when we just don't feel like cooking, or some other things I want us to talk about while we're still here. So when we're on the go, we talked about making sure we have that plan for our meal. If we make an extra portion at dinner, we can use it for lunch. We can bring it with us. But energy balls are a really nice way of taking them with us as a great snack. They have some protein, they have some fiber, and those are the things we want to focus on when we are making a snack. So we'll pull out our book here, get our recipe out. And in our bowl, I started with my peanut butter. So great plant-based protein. And then we also need our applesauce. So applesauce is a great addition because it replaces the added sugars. So sometimes in energy balls, it will have it'll have honey or maple syrup. And with PKD, we want to be avoiding those added sugars. So we know that added sugars, one, they can lead to weight gain. They're kind of empty calories, but they also are linked with cyst growth. So the less added sugars we can have in our diet, the better. So by swapping in the applesauce in this recipe, it's a really great way of kind of controlling those added sugars. So to my 1/4 cup of peanut butter, we're going to do 1/2 cup of applesauce. And then we're going to add some flavoring with vanilla extract, which is also a really easy way of adding flavoring to our yogurts, because yogurts can be another source of added sugars in our diet. But vanilla extract, it actually doesn't have any sugar in it. So we could buy plain yogurt and we can add vanilla extract. We get that flavor of vanilla, but we don't have the added sugars in it. So things like pop and juice, they tend to be some of the bigger sources of added sugar in our diet as well. And that's why we focus a lot on choosing that water as our beverage of choice. With PKD, we want to be aiming for about that 3 liters of fluids to help lower the cyst growth by reducing the vasopressin hormone. And then certainly, if you drink coffee or tea, it's okay to have that 200 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is about 2 coffees or 4 teas. So into our energy balls, we're going to put 1 teaspoon of vanilla and also 2 cups of our whole grain oats. With oats, they can be gluten-free if you are following a gluten-free diet. These ones just happen to be, but they don't necessarily need to be gluten-free. So 2 cups. So the other thing with measuring cups is that there are measuring cups for dry ingredients, and then there are also measuring cups for liquid ingredients. So we don't have any liquid ingredients today, but just if you are, it's important to use the different cups for different things. We're going to also add 2 tablespoons of our walnuts. We have 2 tablespoons of our flaxseed. We have a 1/4 cup of our unsweetened coconut. And then we are also going to put a teaspoon of cinnamon. And cinnamon, just like at any time, we certainly can measure with our heart, but we will follow the recipe. It depends on how much flavoring you like. Now we're going to keep the hemp parts until the end because we will actually roll the balls in them. But you could also put them in the mix if you like. We're still going to give you that crunch. So inside my bowl, I have all of my ingredients. As I was saying, energy balls can be a great option for on-the-go snacks. Other things to think about bringing to work might be some nuts and fruit. Veggies and hummus can be really great snack ideas as well. And then when we think about having all of these in the fridge, sometimes those easy no-cook or sheet pan meals can be really nice ways when we just don't feel like cooking. We can have an egg, and then maybe we'll have some vegetables with it and a slice of whole grain bread. That's still a balanced meal. It doesn't need to be fancy. We don't need to, roast a chicken and do some vegetables and do all the fixins and the sides for it to be a very nutritious meal. It just needs to be balanced. And so that's where we can think about that plate. Similarly, for lunches, I love the idea of like little lunch boxes or bento boxes because you can put your cut up vegetables, you can put your nuts, you can put your hummus, you can put your whole grain crackers, you can put some cheese in it if you wanted to. And that kind of helps it to get to be this very balanced lunch meal. So the fiber and the protein are going to help keep us full, and the carbohydrate gives us that quick energy we're looking for during the workday. Now, once we have this all mixed together, we are going to portion them into 2 tablespoon balls. Oh, I will take 2 of my tablespoons here. I just make them into a nice ball. Roll them into our hemp seeds. And then I find these ones are best if we put them in the fridge overnight, just to firm them up. And then you can actually keep them in the freezer for freshness. So you don't have to eat all 12 of them at once. You can use them over a couple of days. They defrost really, really quick. So you can usually even just eat them within a couple of minutes of them coming out of the freezer. These, they're going to last for a couple of weeks in the fridge, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 3 months, sorry, in the freezer. If you wanted, you could use like a dark chocolate chip in it. It's going to have less sugar than a milk chocolate chip. You can change up the nuts in it. You can change up the seeds if you wanted to. But this is a really, really good portion size for a snack. 2 of them, absolutely no problem. That's going to be about 8 grams of protein and a lot of really great nutrients, lots of omega-3s in there too. All right, we have lots of resources for everyone that we're going to share tonight too. So we have 2 editions of Love Your Kidneys. The first one talks a little bit about the PKD diet and some of the things we were speaking about tonight, like protein and fluids and sodium. And then our new edition of the cookbook looks at meal planning. So we have lots of different ways that you can focus on, what should I have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and incorporate those recipes. The My PKD community, we also have lots of great resources. There's lots of nutrition content, there's lots of other mental health resources, and lots of things to support you with PKD. And then, certainly there's the blog, which also has more recipes and more strategies to support you. And I know we will send those out directly to you so you have access to the recipes themselves. Because that's really sometimes when we're thinking, what are we going to eat? And if we find, 1 or 2 recipes per week that we can use for meal planning, that helps to make the rest of the week a little bit easier too. I'm going to take a poke in to see the questions. I think I tried to catch them as they were coming up, but correct me if I missed any.
I was keeping track of the ones that I don't think that you addressed. So,
Perfect. Thank you.
someone was asking, they're in later stage kidney failure, EGFR around 15, and they've been told to eat white bread, not whole wheat bread. And so they found it kind of confusing to hear you talk about eating whole wheat instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, these are really general recommendations. Your kidney function and your healthcare team may know a little bit more about your health than what I do tonight. There are some medications that can increase potassium. We get most concerned about potassium being able to get rid of it when the GFR goes below 15. So I would ask your team why they recommended the white breads. It's not really current recommendations for a low potassium diet. I did think I saw, and I didn't answer, what if you are restricting potassium, it's 2,000 milligrams per day. And to put it into perspective for you, like these whole grain crackers, this one is an old label, so it doesn't have potassium on it. But this whole grain pasta, in a quarter of the package, has 150 milligrams of potassium in it. So if you have a budget of 2,000 milligrams of potassium per day, and you chose a quarter of this, it's a very small percentage of your potassium intake. So you're also not going to absorb all of that potassium. So I would definitely ask your team why they recommended it, but a very old way of thinking. We don't restrict potassium anymore.
Someone is saying is 2,000 milligrams for those on dialysis, 2,000 milligrams of potassium. Is that the same for people on dialysis?
It's for those who have been advised to follow a low potassium diet. So depending on your dialysis type, that may be a recommendation for you if you're on hemodialysis, if you're on peritoneal dialysis, You may be able to have more because you're doing more dialysis more often, right, compared to hemodialysis. But really, that 2,000 milligrams is if you were told to follow a restriction.
One of the other questions earlier on was asking, is there in the hierarchy of beans, like chickpeas or white beans or kidney beans, is there a better or worse one to be eating?
There is not, and I think it really boils down to personal preference as well. Whether it be black bean, chickpeas, lentils, brown kidney beans, any of those things, they're all really great from a fiber perspective. And this amount of protein, this portion here, half a cup, has about 7 grams of protein in it. So whether you choose fresh or frozen or sorry, from beans, whether you choose canned or dried, it doesn't matter for sure.
Awesome. Someone asked earlier on, um, do the Mrs. Dash products have salt in them?
They do not. And I was looking through my cupboards today of where my Mrs. Dash is, and I must have used it all. So Mrs. Dash is just dried herbs, just like McCormick's. They have some, it's really the blends of ones that we get concerned about that have salt in them. So, like for example, this more of a seasoning rub, it will have salt in it, as opposed to just a pure dried herb.
Awesome. Someone was asking, is there an alternative you'd recommend for dairy if a person has a sensitivity to dairy products?
Yeah, there's lots of alternatives, whether it be soy, almond, coconut, oat, any of them are perfectly fine from a PKD perspective. We just get concerned about the additives. So often those non-dairy beverages have a lot of potassium or phosphorus additives in them. So reading that ingredient list is going to be really important. So just up here on the label, we want to be looking to see if it has that PHOS or if it says potassium in it. And those would be ones that we would want to be avoiding because we absorb 100% of it when it's in here. So you can see that it does have potassium in the ingredient list here.
And one more question I don't think we got to is someone was asking, what does a whole day's worth of potassium look like in terms of a menu?
That is a great question. Um,
And I'm assuming they meant the 2000, like sort of a limited potassium.
because so many foods have different amounts of potassium in them. So, for example, something like a cucumber, much less potassium in it than an avocado. So, you could have like a quarter of an avocado, and that would be 200 milligrams of potassium. But that also might mean that you could have like 6 of these cucumbers. So sometimes we focus on having the lower potassium foods if we are trying to keep below that 2,000 milligrams, which is why portion size comes into effect, right? We could eat the whole avocado and it would be 900 milligrams of potassium. So if you wanted to use your entire day on just that avocado or half of your day on avocado, you certainly can, but you're going to be displacing other nutrients because you won't be getting the fiber, anything, right? Yeah, I just saw
So
Leanne says
go
I
ahead.
need to eat to my labs. So definitely very important to understand your blood work. There is a few downloads actually that have your blood work and you can track it and you can see, if you need to make any adjustments to it. I wish I could know all of your blood work and tell you exactly how much you need to be having, but on this webinar, I don't have access to that information. So hopefully this gives you some things to ask your team or think about because that's really what our healthcare teams are for.
Awesome. So if anyone has more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A area. A couple of questions we had from the registrations that I don't think were addressed is
Mhm.
someone was asking, and this was a late registration, is there any significant benefit to eating organic fruits and vegetables for kidney health?
For the kidney health, there is not a benefit to it. And I would say organic foods are very much a personal choice. So we do monitor pesticide levels in Canada. And even among foods that are produced in Canada, we can't always guarantee that they're 100% pesticide free when we just based on where the wind blows and where the organic foods are. Organic foods are also quite costly, so depending on our food budget, may not be feasible for us. So there's no recommendation, whether or not.
Another question that in the registrations was, do any foods cause more cyst growth?
So we talked a bit about some of them tonight. So we know added sugars can cause the cyst growth. High amounts of protein, so more than that 1.3 grams per kilogram, can increase the cyst growth. And too much salt can also increase our cyst growth because it increases that vasopressin hormone. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that hormone low.
Awesome. Someone in the registrations asked, can baking powder be used even though it
Yes.
contains phosphorus?
So that is a great question. Sorry, I did have that on my list of things to go through when we were talking about some of our baking items. So added phosphorus, I think if we are baking at home, there are a lot of easy substitutes. And I know the question was also about lemon juice, if you could use that as a substitute. But cream of tartar and baking soda tend to be a little bit more of a better leavening agent than that. So that tends to be a little bit of a better substitute if we are avoiding those added phosphorus things. Now, you can get phosphorus-free baking powder as well. So that's typically found in like more of the organic section, natural health areas of the grocery store. Or you could use cream of tartar.
Awesome. Now, there's one question I actually had when you were doing the demo. When you were adding in the flaxseed, I
Mhm.
couldn't really tell. Was it whole flaxseed or ground flaxseed, and does it make a difference?
Yes, so we used whole flaxseed in this recipe because it has the fiber piece, whereas ground flaxseed is more of an omega-3 source in our diet. We do get the omega-3s, but our body can't break down flaxseed. So when we do eat the energy balls, you may see little bits of flaxseed in your poop. And that's okay. Just like if we eat corn, that happens. Our body's just using it more of a fiber source than an omega-3 source, but the hemp parts have omega-3 in them as well.
Awesome. And another question from the registrations was about a grocery list for stage 3 kidney disease. And maybe this is where I give a plug for Love Your Kidneys Too, which is a week of PKD friendly meals. And within that, they have uh, both Emily, who is one of the co-authors, and Roxanne Papineau, who is our French language registered dietitian, put together a week full of menus. And so if you've had a look at our Love Your Kidneys 2 already, you'll find that in there. And I will resend a copy of it when I send out the follow-up email. And then it's kind of easy to take your ingredients for your shopping list from that. Any other suggestions for when you're preparing a shopping list, Emily, and you want to make it as kidney friendly as possible?
Yeah, I always take an inventory of what I have in the house first. And then I have a running list of things on the fridge whenever I run out. So, if I finish my peanut butter or I notice I'm finishing it, I'll put it on the list so that when I go, I can start to keep it just kind of speeds me up instead of saying, what did I run out of this week? And then the second thing I look at is the flyers. So there's apps like Flip, or even just going to the grocery store website to see what's on sale. And that tends to be how I buy my grocery. I focus a lot on the vegetable and fruit section. I tend to go less often to the protein section because of just portion sizes. It tends to last a little bit longer when we're having more of that portion size of our palm. And then making sure that I always have some staples in the house, whether that be some hummus, some canned beans, eggs, yogurt, those sort of things are always on my list.
Awesome. Couple more questions I see in the chat. One person's asking, are there nuts that we should limit?
No, nuts are fine. They're a great source of omega-3, good plant-based protein. You really would only be limiting portion if you have high potassium.
And someone's asked or said, I thought whole ground flax seed was bad for you, and I'm not sure which one they meant, whole or ground. But
That's okay. So whole flaxseed, it's just more of a fiber source in our diet, whereas ground is the omega. They're both fine. The ground we have to keep in the fridge. The flax is kind of more shelf stable. Whether it be flax in itself or as an oil, those are all fine for us to have in our diet.
awesome. And the last person is asking, is hummus a good source of protein?
It has some protein in it. I wouldn't say it's a stellar source, but it's enough for a snack. Has a couple of grams of protein in it per quarter cup. So you can certainly incorporate it into your diet.
Awesome. Well, that looks like the end of the questions, and I see our time is just up. I want to thank you so much, Emily, for joining us tonight and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I know I've seen in the comments, I've seen a lot of thanks directed towards you and how much you're able to share. I do want to reassure people that we are recording this session. It will be available for viewing on a YouTube channel for the coming weeks. And if you registered for this event, you get first notice that the video is available before anyone else knows. Um, and also because of the different cameras and the issues with seeing some of the labels earlier on in the webinar, don't worry if you are able to watch the YouTube version once we put it up. I'll make sure that the labels are edited in there. Um, as I mentioned earlier, you can find Emily's website at kidneynutrition.ca. And as Emily has mentioned, you can find more information about PKD nutrition on our website. If you just put endpkd.ca /nutrition, that will take you sort of to the entry portal for everything Emily has done. Um, I want to say that, into the 30s, the number of blogs that Emily has done for us, and many of them come with recipes. And they're all on topics like potassium and phosphates, and on things like high blood pressure and on protein. So I invite all of you to browse through the nutrition blog. There's lots to be found there. You can also find more information on PKD nutrition on our private online community, My PKD. And there you'll find we've got an index of all of Emily's and Roxanne's recipes that they'd shared with us. So if you want sort of a quick and easy access to all the PKD friendly recipes, you can find them on My PKD. And I've seen a couple of people who are new to our webinars. We tend to have at least a couple of them about nutrition every year, so keep your eye on any upcoming events. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.